Hello, and welcome to the webinar on CI/CD benchmarks for high-performing teams in 2021. I'm Chris Cardoza, news editor of SC Times. Before we get started, I just have a couple of quick housekeeping announcements. First, this webinar will be recorded and available on demand in about 24 hours after the event. Secondly, we will be doing a live Q&A after the presentation. You can submit your questions through the Control Panel's Questions tab at any time during the event, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. Joining us today is Ron Powell, the Technical Content Market Manager for Circle CI, and Sergey Tupche, a Senior Engineer at Contentful. And they're here to talk about what metrics you should be measuring for DevOps productivity, how to increase your productivity, as well as some goals you can set for your engineering teams. So to get things started, I'm going to throw it over to you, Ron.
Thank you so much, Christina. And Sergey, thanks for joining me today. This is a really great topic. I think this is an area of focus that has become incredibly relevant to engineering teams. And I'm really excited to present today about not just how to measure the performance of engineering teams, but really how to think about what types of value engineering teams are bringing to your organization and how we upsell that into the organization. And I have with me here software engineer from Contentful, Sergey, who actually does implement the types of things that we are going to talk about, metrics tracking for engineering teams, velocity, and so on and so forth with his team at Contentful. And so happy to have him on the panel today as well. Sergey, would you like to say anything more about your role?
Yeah, thanks, Ron, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me. And yeah, so hi, my name is Sergey, and I'm a software engineer in product services group at Contentful. And our team specifically is focused on Contentful engineers and providing tools, techniques, and processes to enable engineers to be more productive and ship changes faster and efficiently with quality in mind. And our team is also responsible for and owning a CI/CD field in our company, and we are working on a tooling to help increase Contentful developers' productivity. So we'll be happy to talk about that.
Yeah, awesome. So let's just to give a little bit of context as to why I am here to talk about this. What I have here is a picture of a few of the last few years, a State of DevOps reports. This is a report that's produced by Puppet. There's similar State of DevOps reports produced by a couple of other companies, as well as Jez Humble has written the Accelerate book. All of these things talk about 4 high-level engineering metrics and the way that folks respond, or the way that folks are measuring them, and where their teams are at today. One of the interesting things is that Circle CI, as a continuous integration platform, has the capacity to measure actual behavior on our platform that maps to a lot of the metrics that are discussed in some of these big reports. And so we at Circle CI have recently started to produce an annual report. We're on our 2nd report right now, the State of Software Delivery report, and it is measured from actual performance on our platform. Whereas a lot of the other reports that exist today that are very widely read are from survey data. And so what's the big difference between survey data and data that maps to actual performance on the platform? I have a lot more of it. That's really the biggest difference, but there are other subtle differences as well. The scale of volume that we run for workflows at Circle CI is very, very large. And so the ability to kind of generalize the behavior on our platform through this view is something that is not necessarily available for some of the other types of reports, particular because they're looking at survey data, and that survey data often is biased in a couple of ways. First, the developers that are interested in participating in that survey is at one level of self-selection, and then oftentimes the survey questions are about your primary application or product, and applications are developed in a much more complicated scenario than just the main application or product. And so that also kind of skews some of the data that we see from those bigger reports. So what metrics are these that I'm talking about? I'm sure that most folks are at least familiar with those, the bigger DevOps reports, and so may be familiar with these, but I'll go through them in a little bit more detail, just because, like I said, there is some nuance between what those reports measure and what we talk about in our report. But we do agree that these are the highest level kind of metrics that really are getting at whether or not your engineering team is performing in a healthy and efficient manner. So first thing over here on the left is duration. Now, oftentimes in survey data, this looks like lead time, and lead time can be a little bit different than the duration. The duration, what I'm measuring here is I commit code to my shared repository that kicks off a Circle CI workflow. The length of time that workflow runs is the duration that's measured here. And so I can then measure or compare that to all of the other workflow runs that occur on our platform and get some really rich information out of that. Mean time to recovery. This, I think, is one of the most valuable things that you get out of continuous integration. The Accelerate report, the Puppet reports, the Dora report, that was the other company that does another big DevOps report. Those reports do a really good job of proving out the value of continuous integration. They show how it can increase velocity. They show that the teams that are adopting continuous integration are able to produce software much more rapidly. But oftentimes, I think there's a little bit of confusion as to what the most valuable velocity is. And I have opinions about this. I personally believe that it is the mean time to recovery metric that is the one that you want to drive as close to zero as possible. And there's many, many different ways that you want to do that. But ideally, you have a combination of duration and mean time to recovery that is the feedback loop, that is the backbone of continuous integration. I don't get a signal until the duration of the workflow runs, and then I cannot mitigate failed signal or bad signal until I get that, and then I need to measure how quickly I can remedy that. And so there's lots of different ways that we, kind of work these two metrics together to try and optimize performance on our team. The next two, throughput and success rate, I think are they're sanity metrics. These are things that probably are very dependent on the way that you develop software at your organization. I don't think that there's necessarily a great way to benchmark these across the industry, again, because I think that the different paradigms that you develop software in might create different throughputs and success rates depending on how your Git flow works and how your software development lifecycle exists at your company. But these are incredibly valuable to track because you certainly don't want anomalous behavior in success rates or throughputs. And so the four of these combined are really what is at the heart of our report. This is at the heart of the larger reports, but these also are somewhat high level. And while we do firmly believe that the companies who can operationalize or who can optimize on these four metrics are some of the most successful software development companies in the world, it does look different when you try to actually apply the measurement of these to your teams. And then it also looks different when you try to describe the value of optimizing on these four metrics to the rest of your organization. And so that's why I'm really happy that I have Sergi here today, who is going to be able to help me talk a little bit more about what this looks like at an organization. I think everyone could agree that we want duration to be short but reasonable, right? Our code is well tested, so that's going to take some time. So our duration is reasonable. Mean time to recovery we want to be as low as possible. Throughput is going to be dependent on the way that we develop and deliver software, and success rates very likely dependent on the way that we develop Git flows at our organization. And so how do you increase productivity in 2021? I'm going to let the person who does this for a living start talking at this point.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the next slide. So I just want to give a short word about Contentful here. So what are we doing and what's the company is about? So Contentful is a building-centric content platform, and we help digital teams to assemble content and deliver digital experiences at scale. We do this by integrating cloud services and making it easy to connect with your tech stack, giving the possibility to deeply customize the platform and automate workflows. And we offer a reliable and secure infrastructure that leading brands count on. And our API-first approach means we can federate content from other systems, including other CMS, or living alongside the digital experience platform that you have in place. And if you go to the next slides, please. Yeah, so here at Contentful, we definitely thought about like efficiency and productivity, and we had some internal challenges faced in company. We needed to scale. We were doing good on the market, and we knew that we will scale our team soon. And we were interested in like how our engineering teams are doing, and we were interested in general in the engineering health of the teams and how they are performing. Also, in terms of costs we are investing, and in terms of the business impact, like how we get the return on investment, because our organization was looking to create more business impact, and commonly other business leaders expressed this as we feel that engineering is slow, so we wanted to actually visualize that and get some more data on the performance of the teams and benchmark this performance. And we were also wondering, like, how do we apply and interpret all those state of DevOps reports? So we read like all the DevOps reports which Ron was telling about before. Also, we were closely looking into the Circle CI state of software delivery report, and we were interested at the time also in all the study which was described in the Accelerate book. And in general, yeah, we wanted to know where do we start. And we knew that a clear understanding of defining, measuring, and predicting developer productivity could provide our organization and managers and developers as well ability to make higher quality software and make it more efficiently. And in those reports and books, there is an overwhelming amount of good advice, practices, tools, and processes that you should use to improve. And it's very hard to know what to do, actually. And when new tools and techniques are introduced, those metrics can clearly show the degree to which developer effectiveness is improved, or at least isn't worse. So yeah, we were wondering how to reach the healthy and mature scaling and growth. And we knew that the best organization also tend to have invested deeply in their technical process and cultural capabilities. And it was a combination of all those investments that is reflected in both their successes and these metrics. So if you go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so I think we are a bit far away. If you go back. So we thought about all of that at Contentful, and we knew that we need to get this data somehow. And we started to think about that, and to facilitate this, to get more data, to measure this data somehow, measure 4 key metrics. We put together a small team with 2 senior engineers who had experience in field of test automation and delivery infrastructure, and I was one of amongst those engineers, and we were interested in process improvement and engineering productivity, and that was the beginning when we formed the team called Test Automation and Tooling, and yeah, shortly we called it Tools. And our first task was to consolidate and improve our test automation efforts, and we made an explicit choice from the onset to connect our goals to the broader mission of engineering productivity and effectiveness. And especially we wanted to focus on reducing lead time and the risk of getting changes into production. So we defined what is applicable and can be scraped in terms of our organization, and we realized that there are lots of resources, so we needed actually to standardize those data sources. And we knew that some of the data might be hard to capture or consolidate, so basically we had to standardize the input data sources. Also, after we did the initial implementation, we needed also to educate engineers and business people. So find influencers in our organizations and talk to them, listen to them, and also basically learn and share. Also, we needed to get the support from senior management, so they are aligned with our goals and could help us to implement and reason about the data we will produce from those metrics. And we constantly afterwards review and reason about this data. The engineering organization or department adopted the 4 key metrics to create a refined view of how fast we were delivering in terms of cycle time and whether our quality was stable, like rollback or fix rate. And afterwards, we started to learn and find patterns and improve and share the knowledge among the different teams. Also action the insights, so figuring out how to present the data so that people can action them, can action those insights we get from the data. Also, we were working together close with agile coaching team to create playbooks for teams and to help them reach the next performance tier in developers' KPIs. And as well, tying in the developers' KPIs data with other engineering business systems, such as our R&D investment tracker we are using internally, utilizing dev KPIs for product development leadership, and cost allocation system as well, and also utilizing the developers' KPIs for our finance department. If you go to the next slide. Yeah, so based on that, since I'm also studied in the university finished university as a mechanical engineer and studied aviation related devices, I recently found this article. I don't remember who written it, but I would like to do this analogy with a plane. So like just as an airplane pilot must monitor dozens of different metrics to keep the plane flying, so too would an engineering leader benefit from viewing their team's metrics to understand overall performance. So I like this phrase, and we sort of build a cockpit for our leaders and teams to basically see and measure their performance and efficiency. And this is one of the our dashboards. So we basically have a backend services which gather like data from different data sources, and then we produce this. We don't have like a specific UI, so we took a Grafana as a UI for showcasing those metrics for the engineering teams and leaders as well. So if you go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so in terms of impact, how does this affect it and how does this improve our organization? So first of all, the live data is always available, so it's real time. And now we are able to show in detail the health of our engineering organization, expressed in performance and quality metrics of the developers' KPIs. We could have a more sophisticated with the other business leaders to evolve the conversation from only looking at the speed of the engineering organization to a more systemic conversation about how fast we can deliver business impact. And with developers' KPIs, we are sidestepping all these derived reports and instead all of the organization to ingest and act on near-time team-specific data directly. Also, we enable teams to experiment and share their success. And as a developer, it is basically delivering the maximum value to your customer is important, and it is being able to apply your energy and innovation in the best way towards the company goals. And an effective environment makes it easy to put useful high quality software into production and to operate it so that the developers do not have to deal with the necessary complexities. They could basically concentrate on the value-adding tasks instead. And in terms of also visibility, we have like a monthly review with senior management involved. We have ability to benchmark the performance of our engineering organization using those 4 key metrics or developers KPIs. And it is proven that it's extremely valuable, allowing us to move the focus of the leaders to the delivery system as a whole, including the interaction and dependencies on marketing, support, and sales, and bringing functionality to the market. We have also managed to get the dashboards into like our monthly delivery review to encourage teams to look at and reflect on the data on a regular cadence. This has definitely improved visibility, and today team management like product managers, engineering managers reflect on the performance data and derive a presentation for group management, and then group management reflects on these presentations and derive a new presentation for the departmental leadership. And leadership reflects on the following metrics and reports and create yet another presentation for company leadership. So we have like this line of visibility. Also, yeah, in terms of like switching the context, engineering versus other departments, like lots of organizations look for the ways to measure developer productivity, and the common anti-pattern is to look at the lines of code, feature output, or to put too much focus on trying to spot the underperforming developers. And it is better actually to focus on how the organization is providing an effective engineering environment, and being productive motivates developers. And we wanted to actually switch the context and basically change this mindset. And we also invest into improvements if the business side of the organization cannot leverage the advantage of multiple deployments per day, like enabling super fast feedback and the ability to dial in functionality to market response, then the benefits are limited to engineering cost savings instead of accelerating value creation. So yeah, that was the impact, and it's definitely helped us to accelerate, and we are still looking into improving our organization and engineering department and actively working on that. That's it from my side, Ron. I believe it's you next.
No, that's actually great. This is really helpful to see how these types of things actually get done in the real world. There's lots of folks that are now creating these state of such and such reports, and being able. There was one place that you had in here where you talk about actionable insights, and that's the real value of this. Doing historical monitoring, like what has happened in the past, is very helpful, but it's more helpful when you can create actionable insight out of it instead of just an understanding of the historical record. And so really happy to see that you've been able to operationalize on some of these metrics and that your organization is seeing the results that you are. So how can engineering teams set meaningful goals in 2021? Sergey showed his slide, and I'm going to go back to the dashboard real quick. Just to kind of talk about what we think are some of the benchmarks for these things that we've come up with at Circle CI. We clearly, the 4 metrics, I think, are mostly represented here, but there's a little bit more fine detail, and that makes sense because your organization will probably want fine detail in order to really maximize on the ability to make these processes efficient and then deliver the value from them. But there's code delivery time, there's fix rate, there's deployment frequency from master to production. Like all of these things are incredibly valuable things to be tracking for organizations. When we think of what we measure duration on our platform, so workflows we see run anywhere from 2 seconds up to I think we have a cutoff of some number of days. And there are some workflows, unfortunately, that are hitting those things. I'm not exactly sure what's happening in those workflows, but I wouldn't recommend anyone to replicate it. But incredibly fast short flows or workflows are sometimes reasonable. I mean, the shortest one that we measured was 2 seconds. I don't think that there's a lot of information you can get back from a workflow that runs in 2 seconds. I mean, I think you could probably print the screen in 2 seconds, but there's very, very few things that are actually going to be able to occur. But at 10 seconds, I could probably run quite a large number of unit tests in less than 10 seconds and get a signal back from that. So really, really low duration isn't completely unreasonable, but we found that the 50th percentile looked something closer to about 10 minutes. And so we think that, you know, as far as benchmarks go, if you're really well above 10 minutes, I think that that's probably a pretty good place to start trying to find ways to make improvements. You know, the mean time to recovery that we measured on our platform at the 50th percentile was about 1 hour. 1 hour is incredibly short. Like that's there were some people that timed out, right? We measured our data set over the course of 30 days. And so there were, I mean, it was non-zero number of workflows that started at the beginning of that window that ran, failed, and then were never fixed in the 30-day window. And so including all of the things that, you know, we do a little bit of data sanitation, but looking at the 50th percentile and seeing that folks on our platform are hitting about 1 hour is very reasonable. We expect that there are many teams that should be able to hit that as well. I did talk a little bit about throughput. I'll just highlight here that the deployment frequency for this particular team at Contentful isn't 100 times a day. It looks like it's 1.3 times per day, which isn't unreasonable either. When we measure this across our entire platform, you know, we don't necessarily have visibility into which workflow is a deploy because we really are unbiased as to what your workflow does on our CI tool. Deploy is just one of many things that you could do with the CI tool. And so we have to assume that there's a certain subset of workflows that then would belong to the deployment category. And even though we make some pretty rudimentary assumptions about this, we get less than 1 deploy per day. And that averages over the 44,000 organizations that currently use Circle CI. And so there are teams that are deploying significantly more than that. I mean, I do a lot of updates to circleci.com, and we deploy it more than that number of times per day. And so there are teams that are doing that. There are teams that, you know, the 95th percentile had teams pushing in the tens of times a day, up to 100 times a day. That's not unreasonable, but that also means that your organization probably made a lot of choices as to how to get that number to be up so high. It's not trivial to get there. And I really do think that monitoring your throughput is more valuable than trying to match some other organization that builds software in a different paradigm than you do. And then the last thing was success rate. I think we have the success rate, I think, is also one of those things, and I talked about this a little bit earlier, that is going to be difficult to kind of standardize across organizations because of the ways that different organizations develop software. If you have a Git flow model that requires feature branch development, those types of things, you know, it could be short-lived feature branch development, it could be long-term. I mean, there's lots of different ways that you see that type of innovation. And in those circumstances, the main branch of that your application lives on often doesn't ever fail, or it fails very rarely. And so you get very high success rates on the branch that has the main application. That's to be expected. You would want a really high success rate on that branch, and we think teams should be looking at 90 to 95% or above for that. But when you look at the feature branches, we're trying to build cutting edge software. We're trying to like learn and innovate. And so learning and innovating looks like not all of my choices are the right choices, right? So success rate is a reflection of how much innovation is happening on my team. I mean, there's also human error, right? We are humans, we create software. We are not perfect in our application of building software. And through that, you know, we use these types of tools to kind of like, you know, give us confidence that we're able to, you know, do our best work, and a small accident or a typo or something like that is caught by our tooling. We are not pushing that type of change into our production, and that I can try new things. I can, you know, experiment, build new models, build new classes, and see if I can get speed to improve. Not all of my choices will improve speed. You know, there's lots of different things that I can think of that you would want to do on these types of feature branch development, and it would and consider healthy success rate on those branches to be something that's above 50%, but maybe not so high above 60%. I think that that would be a reasonable amount of my developers trust their tool, they trust the tests, and they know that they can push code quickly and in small packets so that they can remediate any type of error that might occur in that. So our 4 benchmarks, or the benchmarks that we've come up with from our platform, on the 4 metrics that I described at the beginning, duration, mean time to recovery, throughput, and success rate, are a duration of about 10 minutes, a mean time to recovery of under 1 hour. Throughput should be based on your business's needs for software delivery, and then success rate is going to be highly variable based on what type of get flow model that your team is using. But in any scenario, you shouldn't have abnormal signals in these things as you monitor and watch them, and so there's a lot of value in that as well. So at this point, I will turn it over to our audience and see if we have any questions. Hi, Christina.
Hi, great guys. Yeah, so just a reminder, if anyone has any questions or anything, you can ask them in the control panel's questions tab now, and we'll get to as many as possible. So Sergey, I want to start with you. You talked a lot about what you guys did at the business level to implement this, but what was the reaction at the team level implementing this? How did you get them on board to this change, and what was their response?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, we definitely got some like a bit of pushback on the beginning and the misunderstanding why we specifically need to look at those metrics. And yeah, like as I mentioned, it was important to educate people, also work with senior management, align with them, like what we are trying to achieve here, what we are measuring, and also clearly explain what are those metrics about and how we want to use them, like not measuring individual performance. We actually looking to contributing to success of the team, and yeah, measuring performance of the teams, and also exchanging their experience if they're successful in some field, and if they like apply some successful practices, then they could be also taken by other teams and look at this from the perspective of like knowledge sharing. And also it was important to, as I said before, also to find influencers in our organization and talk to them, so they could be more basically, since like people listen to them, and also willing to challenge their orthodoxy in a way. And yeah, it's also was important to listen, learn, and share. And its adoption is challenging, and it's not always obvious to stakeholders or developers why these particular metrics are valuable. And it's a bit a stretch to ask everyone to read Accelerate, even so there is pretty good material and really interesting study to go through and follow all the advices mentioned there. But in the end, we have managed to get the dashboards into, as I mentioned, into our monthly delivery review. So everyone was aligned and dedicated about what we are trying to achieve there. And we started to encourage teams to look at and reflect on the data on a regular cadence. And it's important to actually that we have the regular sort of tool which brings you real-time data, because as Ron mentioned before, there are lots of things depends on the context in which you work, in what kind of processes you have inside the teams. So when you have the real-time data, you can actually do some comparisons and experiments and basically get out some useful data out of it.
Great.
So
And
yeah,
yeah, that was a great point. I just wanted to add that you made, you're measuring the team performance and productivity. You're not measuring individual productivity, because I think engineers can sometimes get scared that they're being looked at or they're being micromanaged. You also mentioned that you put some of this in playbooks so that you could help other teams and spread the word across the company. So do you have any best practices you can share on how to implement these metrics or where to get started? And Ron, if you have any also you want to share.
Yeah, I definitely, as I mentioned already, like going through Accelerate book, going through all the state of whatever delivery, software delivery report from the Circle CI is also very useful. They have lots of advices in there, which you can follow. Also, like more old state of Devops reports also have some advices. They have also, they produce like an annual report, which you can find if you like look for a DORA report. There is also recently a good articles went out like from on the Martin Fowler website. I don't remember from whom specifically, but they are also talking there about the feedback loops and specifically how like focusing on optimizing those loops, making the teams work faster and measure them, and also yeah, basically reason about them on the specific outcomes. Yeah, so that's in all those reports, as I said, like a good chunk of a good advice, and I definitely recommend going through that as a starting point.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, that's a great list of references. I would highly recommend going through any of those reports as well. But I think it, like as far as where you get started at work, I think that the first thing, we talk about benchmarks, but benchmarks, there's 44,000 organizations that are included in my analysis of workflows, and not all of those organizations are doing the exact same thing. And so there's going to be some effort that you need to do to really just figure out how you need to show up in that. So that means measurement, right? That means that the first step is, where am I at? Like, am I doing well in duration? Am I doing well in mean time to recovery? Am I doing well in throughput and success rate? Are those things fluctuating? Are they fluctuating in ways that are predictable? Are there things that I can do to mitigate those signals? And those are that really is kind of the beginning. That also is the moment, I think, where a lot of teams start to realize the value add of continuous integration. And I say the value out of continuous integration in versus the value add of automation, right? Much of what we've talked about includes many, the automation of many parts of our application development pipeline, but that isn't the only thing. And Sergi does a good job of really talking about the feedback loop that you get from continuous integration. Not all of our code is going to be perfect. There is the assumption that not all of our code is going to be perfect. And so building in systems that give us the capacity to freely be able to confidently push code changes and know that if I've made an error, that I can mitigate that error, and that the rest of my team isn't depending on how quickly I can debug this thing. Those types of opportunities really do start to become the focus. Right now, when you just automate everything and there aren't really and there's not a robust test environment, you arrive at a successful build trivially, right? If no tests, nothing fails unless infra is a problem. And so that there isn't a lot of value in that if you actually do introduce bugs, right? Because now debugging, you've got no signal. So now you're trying to like go back in, rebuild the environment, figure out what happened in that environment. If you use a tool that even has robust capabilities to do those types of things, not all tools even have that capacity. And so once you start to recognize that there is value in building culture that is around this feedback loop, and Sergi, knocks it out of the park when he talks about how this really is, the teams in software right now that are building the best software fastest have invested in a culture of continuous integration, and that results in massive acceleration. It isn't just measuring these 4 things and then trying to find needles that will get our numbers slightly smaller. It's recognizing the opportunity to refocus the way that organizations and engineering teams work together and build value for the business. And I think that there's a lot of room still to really lean into that. And once you start to benchmark your own team and see where you're at, I think it does create a lot of visibility into the opportunity to see how continuous integration is going to benefit your organization.
So how do you make sure you're getting the right context around these benchmarks or metrics? If they're failing or they're going down, how do you get the right context into what's happening so that you can really improve?
Do you want to go first, Ron?
Sure. Well, I think Sergi and I probably have the same answer, right? Because we both are fans of test-driven development, and this is the real thing for me, is that like I want to, as I'm developing, build in my backdoors, my confidence space, right? The real value of adding being well tested means that I'm confident that when I get signal from my continuous integration tool, that signal is valuable. And then the mitigation stage, like and this is the kind of the inflection point. The more tests I add to my workflow, the longer it takes to run. And so that means that I get my signal back in a longer period of time. But the more testing that I do, the more robust that signal is, right? When I get a failure, I want to be able to quickly identify where my failure is at, what types of systems that it's affecting, and then be able to remedy that as quickly as I can. And robust testing is what gives me that. The velocity of my automation scripting falls apart when I get a signal back that says that it's failed, and I have to like pretty much completely start from scratch. I don't have good signal. I might know what system is involved. I might know a couple of dependencies, but I'm going to have to really just start building this from scratch. And not adopting test-driven development really does set you back in that space, and it probably is a really hard thing for a lot of organizations to work through as they go from I've automated everything in my pipeline to I now have to start worrying about how to mitigate signal that isn't successful, and what does that look like. And honestly, it looks like coming back to the philosophy of continuous integration, starting to understand the value of well-tested code, starting to understand how the value of being able to build confidence for your engineering teams to know that, like bad code in production is an incident, right? Like that's all hands on deck. People's pagers start going off. These are the types of things that we're mitigating. So developers don't want to create these scenarios for their coworkers at work. They don't. Being on a team that adopts continuous integration, well-tested code as a philosophy, as a culture, means that you're not doing that. You're not waking people up because you forgot to close a curly bracket. Like those types of things really do increase velocity as well as rapport on your team. We're talking about building software with community, right? Like having engineering teams that get along, that have high quality of life, that are happy in their work, and are performant because of those things. And I think that there's real value there.
Yeah, to add up also in terms of the context, and also like what are the important things to have is like the people in the teams are aware of what others are working, so you have like a visibility and people have a clear idea of what they need to do each day, in theory through an effective use of like tracking systems or stand-ups or equivalent. Also CD pipeline that most of the time green with meaningful and actionable checks, as Ron already mentioned. And it's not only about automation, but also designing those checks like tests, linting, and so on. Also work in small code increments that are validated super fast in local with unit tests and fast CD pipelines. And also, yeah, in terms of like if people have a like access and discovery of to the documentation, API specifications, and who can they ask when need to work with another system, so you have like a discoverability. Also, yeah, also like a social things like alternate breaks and socializing Slack with few hours of focused work without interruptions, like minimize meeting slot and distractions. And in terms of deployment, deploy often small changes to production, and you have also sophisticated alerts monitoring and it gives you meaningful, actionable, and trustworthy information.
Great.
Yeah.
Now, the State of Software Delivery report was conducted during the pandemic, Ron. So was there anything, did you see any impact from the pandemic on the report, or anything changed compared to last year?
Absolutely, and this is really interesting because I think that a lot of times we think of software development kind of abstractly as like away from the rest of the world, like it's happening kind of in silos or dark rooms in corners, and it's kind of hidden from where everything happens. But when you have something like a global pandemic, you can start to see the way that affects workflows, right? When the global pandemic began, there were a lot of companies. I mean, you can imagine at that time that their company is probably small enough where they could deploy their code to a Mac Mini sitting under their desk, but everyone got sent home. So now that Mac Mini is unavailable to you. So that put an enormous rush into cloud-first solutions, right? Maybe not in the most sophisticated cloud infrastructure, maybe not trying to build out Kubernetes cluster deploys, but it was a massive migration into the cloud for companies that otherwise would have been able to do their own solutions, buying their own infrastructure and needing to do that. And so we see immediate pickup in new authorizations for organizations that need to meet basically around that type of machine type, size, and use cases. But overall, we see like a spike in workflows run on the platform. This is right when it happens. It's like if you're about to send everyone home and you don't know what is going to happen in the world, you shore up your business, right? You try to you go through all of the bug tickets and resolve all of those. You try and push as many commits that you try and finish development of whatever features are close. You shut down development on the things that are still works in progress, and you really just focus on your main business's objectives. And so we see throughput go up. I mean, like through the end of March, all of April, throughput highest than any other month of the year. And that makes sense. I was worried, and I think there were a lot of people who were worried. But throughput goes up in a lot of interesting ways, right? You start to see workflows run in the evenings. You see workflows run over the weekends. Now, there are always workflows run in the evenings and the weekends, but you see an acceleration of that. And so the interesting thing is that you can't do that forever. We build software with human beings, and human beings burn out. And by May, we see our lowest throughput of the year. And that makes sense to me. That makes sense because there's a lot, I mean, these are people problems ultimately. We build software for people. Software is built by people. And so understanding the way that something like a global pandemic affects the world and the way that we build software is really interesting. And to be able to see these signals really does kind of validate the way that people think about the way that software does affect their businesses, and how to make sure that you're building things efficiently and you're staying as close to your business's goals and objectives as possible. The validating signal that this is probably shoring up work that needed to be completed and filling bug tickets is that success rate in general on our platform, and this would be all branches, and so it's I think it's a little bit skewed high because of that, is about a little over 70%, and it was near 90% through the end of March and most of April. And so that's not innovation. I mean, I'm a strong believer that when I'm innovating, when I do feature development, Sergi's not going to hire me, but when I do feature development, it looks like fail, 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 green. and so like that, and that's, so that would, and that this is a natural progression. You're not building everything perfectly. Your software is well tested, so you're going to get signal back, and you want to be able to operationalize on that. And so that's healthy application development. That's a signal of healthy application development. And what I just described skews heavily low, right? That would be below 50% success rate, and that's not exactly what we see. But that's the understanding there is that in a scenario where throughput
I think we lost Ron for a
success rate
second.
goes up simultaneously, I see shoring up business interests. I don't see a lot of application of innovation in that moment. Very interesting.
Ron, can you check if you muted yourself?
I think we lost you for a minute, Ron, but Sergey, I'm interested to hear, did you notice any impact of team productivity throughout the pandemic, and how did you guys adapt?
Yeah, interesting enough, we actually have also concluded our own report because as we told story before, we had our own metrics which were measured on a daily basis, and we actually already was sort of prepared with a tool we implemented to measure all this data in the metrics which are affecting developers' productivity and efficiency. And in fact, in the end, we actually realized that there is not much changed, but it's also a positive aspect because our senior management was worried about that when because initially we were not like a remote first or remote capable company in general, like we were not oriented on remote work. We were only partially remote company, and like senior management were in the beginning a bit worried about like productivity of engineers and if we can like deliver with the same pace to our customers our product. And in fact, in the end, after like composing this report, we saw that we're actually pretty capable and we didn't have like much interruption. We definitely also have seen those spikes which Ron was telling about before, like in the March and April on the beginning of the lockdown, and we saw like, yeah, definitely lots of people like contributing in different times and different like periods during the day, and also in different, like sometimes also contributing on weekends. That's why we also try to not exclude like those days. So that's why it's also important what I was saying about the context, that we actually taking into account all those aspects, that people could work in a different time zones and people could work also like through the whole week basically. And yeah, we saw that in the end we actually saw a steady growth and steady scaling. So we also, when we add up new team members, they are quickly were integrated despite of the fact that we needed to do all the stuff remotely suddenly. And it's also helped us realize and assure our senior management that we could be progressing successfully, and it's also led to new investments during this year. So we actually were sailing pretty good on the market actually.
Great. Now, before we let attendees go, I just want to throw it back to you guys for final thoughts or key takeaways you want to leave them with today.
I mean, I'll start with the, Circle CI is heavily invested in making it possible to measure your team's performance. We put a lot of investment into workflow insights, and this is an area of great growth for us at the organization right now. And so making it possible to get the information that is important to you and your team around the way that workflows run is one of our main goals at the organization right now, as well as being able to deliver, build and deliver your software as quickly as possible. And if all of that stuff sounds interesting, as well as looking at the data of 44,000 organizations and growing, Circle CI is also hiring right now, and there's any number of job openings that's available on the careers page. So if the things that I've described about application development and being leader in the continuous integration space sounds interesting to you, I encourage you to apply.
Yeah, from my side, like on a more practical perspective, like in terms of like measuring metrics, once you start doing this and measuring like different aspects of the team's productivity, where you have a room for improvement, it's not always easy to turn that somewhat abstract number into something specific and actionable. And we had to continue to refine those metrics, breaking them down on a more smaller chunks, and in order to make them more tangible to teams and hopefully actionable. And in general, the 4 key metrics don't tell the whole story, but we're still looking for a deeper integration with other tools and data sources, and continue to improve our understanding of the whole product development value stream. And I also tend to say that we are scaling quite fast. So if you also willing to work in a productive environment where you can set meaningful goals and measure those goals perfectly, feel free to join us too.
Great. And I know Ron and Sergey are available on GitHub, Twitter, and LinkedIn if you want to connect or ask any more questions, see what they're up to. Thank you again, Ron and Sergey, for a great presentation. That was Ron Powell, the Technical Content Marketing Manager for Circle CI, and Sergey Tupche, a Senior Engineer at Contentful. And thank you, Circle CI, for sponsoring today's events, as well as our attendees for joining us today. So until next time, I'm Chris Cardoza,